Welcome to the Digital Communications Domination, a conversational training resource of www.digitaldominationempireeffect.tumblr.com. I am AliNICOLE Wow, most known for being the ultimate marketplace disruptor, new era branding authority, and the media chess queen. I am also the CEO of the AliNICOLE Wow Encounters Media Tours and president of AliNICOLE Wow, She Does It All Media Empires, which provides over 500 cross-niche online platforms and around 300 publications on Amazon that serve a variety of industries. I am super excited because co-facilitating with me in this endeavor is the one and only Chief Digital Media Communications Authority, Rob Deptford from Robert Deptford Communications. And Rob is most known as the top video communications authority for this digital first business era. Now listen at this. He teaches top brands how to level up their business storytelling skills into digital dominating demonstrations, which allows them to broadcast their brands at the highest level of their expertise and become masterful communication-preneurs. So I'm super excited because today we're going to be having a very important conversation about the current and emerging changes that are happening in the digital business arena and how digital communications will be the leading dominating factor in this era. So I quickly also want to share that the primary focus with this conversational training is really about creating new levels of entrepreneurial awareness, and this is for this digital first communications factor. Like it or not, this is now the new norm. So we want to make sure that you are in the know of what's going to be the requirements to succeed as business owners and those of you who are solo entrepreneurs in this digital era. So we have three core focuses that we're going to be covering during our conversational training. We're going to focus on digital first awareness, branding through communications, and also the basics of becoming a media communications-preneur. So be sure to take plenty of notes. And after this conversational training, Rob and I, we're going to be sharing a few ways that you can level up as a media communications-preneur. And also we're going to be providing some bonuses and a few platforms for you to follow us on. So before I bring Rob forward, because I'm super excited, there are a few things that I want to share about our backgrounds, because we both have educational and professional backgrounds in the areas of media communications, radio and television broadcasting, also journalism, and we're both branding authorities for the digital space. Few other things that we've done, we've co-authored works, we've been featured on podcasts together, and I also have the privilege of training and consulting him in 4 other top elite brands in a mastermind alliance cohort group, and they are furthering, disrupting, and dominating in the digital space. So they are leveling up, and Rob is the king. You know, I mentioned that he's the chief digital media communications authority, but as I mentioned, he's really the king. And let me just say a few things about his empire, Robert Deptford Communications, because listen to this. It is the emerging top digital business first high-level training hub in the marketplace. So you definitely want to be keeping your eyes out for everything that Rob is going to be bringing forth. So I'm looking forward to all that we're going to share about this topic, about his experience, and also how he's sort of way ahead of the traditional innovative strategies that have prepared his empire for creating what I'm definitely claiming as a new definition for digital media success and more. So with no more delays, so we can get right into this, I want to invite Rob into the conversation. So Rob, thank you for being here and joining me in this initiative.
Well, thanks for inviting me to do this. You make me sound great always, and I could say the very same things about you. It's been great hanging out with you in these different ways, and having the opportunity to learn from you, and it's been a lot of fun. So this is another way we're going to have some fun together, and I look forward to the conversation.
Oh, certainly. And thank you so much for your words as well. And, I only speak your truth. I mean, how can I not say anything that's not going to sound great as it relates to Rob Deptford? I mean, come on, we are talking about Rob Deptford here. So, so I can only have great things to say. But you're right. We are going to have fun because this is what it's about. Sometimes business owners and solo entrepreneurs can get kind of the stigmatism of being a little too serious at times, but we're just going to enjoy having this conversational training because that's what it's really about is having a conversation and sharing some value within this space. Now, before we jump into sort of expounding upon and expanding on these core areas of the digital first awareness, the branding through communications, and then sort of jumping into some entry-level concepts around becoming a media communications-preneur, what I was thinking is that I believe it would be best to sort of have a conversation around why digital communications is becoming the dominating factor for entrepreneurs and business owners. So how does that sound to you that we sort of start a focus and then segue into the conversational training?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, well, good.
Let's go.
Yeah, I
Let's
thought that
go
would
to
be
it.
great.
Yeah. I mean, the awareness factor is critical, right? And in case people haven't noticed, the digital first, what I call the digital first business era, has been really developing for quite a few years now. And some people have embraced it and others have not, right? And the concept being, I'm now going to prioritize, not just have digital communication as kind of one facet of my business or a service
Right.
somebody else provides for my business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now going to prioritize that piece, and it's going to be kind of the lead horse of my business. And the companies that have done that and have been working towards that are having some success now, given the environment that we're in, right? Because
Yeah,
the
right.
digital transformation has been catalyzed by the pandemic, of course.
Yeah, right.
And so those businesses that have been preparing for a while are doing reasonably well, and others that have sort of postponed it or put it on the back burner are now saying, well, okay, I got to get on this because it's the way that we need to build to move forward, to not only survive but to thrive in this environment.
You are absolutely right, and thank you so much for starting with that. And we're definitely going to come back and talk a little bit more, obviously, about the digital first awareness, because that is extremely important. Something that you've heard me speak about in terms of becoming a media communications-based empire, and you sort of even alluded to that just in what you were saying, is that the requirements are going to be that you have to become these media communication-based empires, and also with multi-dimensional frameworks. This is not going to be optional in the new digital era. And because you've been leveling up in this realization and also building in this format, I really want to hear you sort of talk about your thoughts around how seeing this is not an option for entrepreneurs and businesses across the board, just based on what you've been learning and building and seeing, in your level up. So can you kind of talk about that, and then we can get into our conversational training around the 3 core focuses?
Yeah, I think, from what I've been seeing, it really is about a perspective shift in how we're viewing the digital space. And there are certain businesses that I think have some assumptions around things that they can and can't do in the digital
Yeah.
space. And I get it, right? So, for example, let's say you're a plumber. Well, but you're going to assume that you have to go out to somebody's home to fix the leaky pipe or the clogged toilet in order to generate business and generate revenue. But that same plumber could be taking appointments online, or could
Yeah.
be delivering educational products online, right? There are options within that space if you develop that digital skill set to be able to expand your business and not only establish more of a presence in the space where consumers we know are looking anyway,
Yeah.
but to also potentially generate revenue in that space from your communication efforts there. So it really is a perspective shift for me.
Absolutely.
From, you know, my core business might be plumbing or electrical work, or maybe I'm a lawyer or an accountant or whatever it is. Shifting from that to, okay, I've got to have these other options as well, because especially right now, I can't go out to somebody else's home necessarily.
Right,
We're
right.
not meeting face to face in offices as much. So I need some other options.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Yeah, and teaching others how to DIY, right? That's definitely another component because of not being able to come into the home. So I love everything you shared. Thank you so much for bringing that, because that's really important for sure. So let's go ahead and dive into the 3 core focuses, which you've actually been talking about this really in terms of the digital first awareness. I believe what I would most like to see be created or cultivated, maybe some seeds that we can plant and start watering today around that, is that there is this lack of awareness in terms of the digital first, because you and I have had several conversations about people don't really realize how important the digital space is, and now it's not optional. So creating this awareness for them to say, no, it is digital first. You have to think digital first, and not just see these elements as components of your business, which is something I talk about and will talk more about even within these new structures around media communications-preneurship, is no longer seeing what we've thought of as elements or aspects of the business. This has to become the business. So you want to dig in a little bit more on the digital first awareness around that?
Yeah, you know, I think it comes from, where do consumers go first? And if we think of it from that angle, you know, it may have been that there was a time that perhaps they looked through the yellow pages and made a telephone call first. Or
Yeah.
perhaps they were browsing as they walked down the street and entered your shop or your restaurant or whatever your business might have been. And while that still happens to a certain extent, although, you know, probably not the yellow pages thing anymore, but certainly the browsing in the shopping centers and things like that. The first stop is not typically that kind of stop anymore.
Right.
It happens to be, and it's not your website either, by the way. For those that, because I know there are businesses that put
Good
up a
point.
website and think, well, we're there, we're in the digital space. We have.
No, good point. Yeah, that's a great point. That's an easy scapegoat, isn't it? Yeah, we are here.
Yeah, but it's really, putting up a website on the internet is sort of like putting up a billboard in the middle of nowhere, right? Unless you
Oh,
have
that's
some
a
other
great
factors
point.
built in, it's not really going to do a lot for you. So you have to think about it differently. So the first stop for most consumers now is Google, frankly, right?
True.
And it
Yeah.
has been that way for quite some time. So when we're talking about digital first awareness, it's recognizing, where does the consumer go first? And the consumer goes to the digital space first, and typically it is a search engine like Google. And then the other big thing, of course, which we've talked about before, is, you know, they'll look for reviews or videos in particular.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Try to get some information to make a decision before they actually go out and visit a business or make a purchase.
Yeah. King Rob Deptford. Already, my goodness, you're just opening it up. But this is the expansion and the levels of awareness that need to be embraced and embodied right now. You know how to bring it. You really stimulate those thought-provoking triggers, if you will, to make people think. That's true. Where we go first, or where the consumer goes first, we really need to think about that. And oftentimes people don't. And I love what you brought up in terms of the whole website and billboard concept, in a sense, is that, yeah, you can have a website, but if you just have your website, that's not really considered. I mean, it's a form, obviously, of digital media and having your presence in the space, but there's so much more to that. That was great. Thank you so much. Do you have anything else you want to share around that before we get into the next core aspect?
Well, I think that, that analogy of putting up the billboard in the middle of nowhere, the objective really has to be, how am I going to be seen where the consumers are looking?
Yes.
And so we
Mm-hmm.
know that consumers are looking online, and
Mm-hmm.
they're not just going to stumble upon your billboard in the middle of nowhere, so to
That's
speak.
right.
So there has to be a broader strategy around, how am I going to expand my digital footprint,
Mm.
and factor in, particularly for the Google searches, some search engine optimization and things, so
Yeah.
that they can find me, they can see me, they can see my
Mm-hmm.
business when they're doing their search, and recognize that, hey, I'm a player amongst the competition in my industry.
That's right.
I'm worth checking out, and eventually, hopefully for the business, they're going to translate that into leads and customers and revenue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent points. Excellent points. Yeah, you're going all in on this. I love this. This is great. It was almost like, wow, we could have just stayed here for a little bit, right?
Yeah, well, this happens to us, right?
Yes, it does. It's like, who was I fooling to put all this in one? But no, this is great. This is great because it really is about cultivating the grounds. As I said before, we're being gardeners today, planting seeds, doing some watering, and the rinse and repeating of what we're going to be sharing in implementation for the listeners will be what will produce that harvest for them. So no, that's great. I really appreciate what you shared. And of course, I co-sign 1,000% for sure.
I know you
So
do.
yeah, so let's talk about branding through communications. One of the things I want to bring up just to those who are listening is, whether you're a speaker, a writer, a trainer, or a marketer, you are really considered to be a communicator, and mainly because your primary focus is on making a connection through verbal, visual, audio, even written content. So everything is communications, but it really is time to make the shift, and the shift in perception that Rob was talking about, of how we see this experience, this new experience, because of the digital era movement that we're in now, is obviously different than what it has been before. One of the mindset shifts or perception shifts that I would like to introduce here is the preneur vibration concept. So, like if you're a writer, you need to be moving more in the energy of a writer-preneur or a writing-preneur, a speaking-preneur, a compelling content creator-preneur. You have to add that on. Everything that pertains to your brand is really now about communications, and you're really going to have to embody this preneur aspect that I'm talking about. Rob, recently you did a collaboration conversational training called Get Vocal on Video, and that was a great demonstration of branding through communications, and it really emphasized the importance and leads people really into this messagepreneurship energy. Or since you were talking more about getting vocal on video, the core concept, people shifting really into a videopreneur energy so that they see how they're showing up with the importance of getting on video, being a little bit more intentional. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and the branding aspect and how it relates to the importance of communications, or just anything you want to share around branding through communications?
Sure. I think, the concept of Get Vocal on Video was really to show the overall power of what video can do for a business in the online space.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is the most powerful communication tool available in the digital space. So
Yeah.
if you're building a brand, or you're looking to generate leads, or whatever your objective is, there's going to be a way for video to serve you quite well. And if we go back to the idea that I was mentioning earlier about Google and that being the first stop for consumers,
Mm-hmm.
well, fundamentally, Google owns YouTube, right? And so YouTube is essentially the world's second largest search engine.
Right.
So just to be found, to be in the space where your target audience is looking for you and your services, having some video content available on YouTube is going to be helpful in that regard.
Oh, absolutely.
So first, so that's how they're going to find you. And then when they do find you, it's how do you show up? And
Mm-hmm.
so in the case of the Get Vocal on Video series that I did with our friend
Yes.
Joseph L. Jones Jr.,
Yes.
and we had a good conversation around this topic and all of the advantages. So I would encourage people to go
Mm-hmm.
check that out on YouTube for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But this really was, how do we show up? And we showed up in many ways, like you and I are doing now, conversationally,
Yes.
showing our, what we sometimes call our authentic selves,
Yeah.
giving a sense of what our personal brand might be and what it might be like to actually work with us and collaborate with
Good
us.
point. Yes. Yes.
So it serves as, not only a way to deliver information, but also a way for the viewer in our target audience to get some sense of, okay, what is it going to be like if I decide to work with this particular person?
Mm.
And that's important. People have to have that know, like, and trust factor if they're
You're
actually
right.
going to eventually buy from you.
Mm-hmm.
And the other piece being, that really, you have to be consistent. And so you have to not only show up that one time in that one video, but you have to show up multiple times so that you're consistent in that experience that you're providing to the viewer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the
Yeah.
other thing with Joseph is, and the same thing with this program with you, we're collaborating on this.
That's right.
And
That's
in
right.
collaborative efforts, these things, these conversational trainings or videos or whatever it is we produce, we have an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to distribute them in different ways, and leverage the distribution. So this could
Yes.
go on my YouTube channel and your YouTube channel. And, in the
Mm-hmm.
case of the conversation with Joseph, it goes on his YouTube channel as well. So that increases our reach as well.
That's right.
And so we're really duplicating what, if you think about in terms of the old ways of broadcasting, a small radio station may have a 10,000 watt transmitter and they cover a certain geographic area. But if you've got another radio station in the market with a 50,000 watt transmitter, assuming all other things are equal, they're going to reach a much larger area and potentially a much
Very
larger
true.
audience. So
Mm-hmm.
collaboration is really us, it's our way of building a bigger transmitter, so to speak.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. And I am all about the communicate, collaborate, and dominate, because building that transmitter, exactly what you're talking about, is how we do leverage the power of communications to have this dominating force. And the reason why the dominating force is so important is because in this day and age, you need to be the leading authority in your message. And if you want it to be communicated and articulated and reach the masses, then there are some things that you're going to have to do to take that ownership in the space and sort of be kind of the dominant voice of a particular perspective. Because with so many different perspectives out there, when you know that you have the one that is definitely the emerging and leading edge, you want to be able to communicate and demonstrate and dominate a space. The domination is not really about competition. So I want to bring this in, because it just sounds like, well, dominating sounds like you're trying to knock someone else out. No, it's just making sure that your message and perspective is being illuminate to draw the people or potential clients, customers, consumers, however you want to language that, the right people to the right places. What I have found in my work in doing industry dominations and disruptions, Rob, is that there's such a mismatch of the consumer and the service provider. and it doesn't sync up for the win-win. So there are a lot of people who are in the wrong places, if that makes sense. And based off of, because a particular brand's voice was not the dominating force enough that it could have the drawing power. Maybe they're an obscure brand. So if people aren't taking ownership in their rightful places with the messages that they've been put here to deliver, then someone's going to get misaligned and go somewhere else and not get those results. So the goal really is for every brand, in the sense, to level up in this high space of communication format so that the right consumers go to the right places, because it's enough for everyone. So we really don't have to be competitive, but we do have to take that right ownership and make sure that as a brand, we are showing up, transmitting, as you were saying, and collaborating and doing all the things that will bring people to the messages that they need to have to get to their next level.
Yeah, I'm right with you on this. I think that it's one of the critical things that businesses need to understand as part of their strategy.
Yes.
Again, to be able to thrive as we go forward, because there is such an evolution happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. And with that evolution, there has to be that continuation of expansion, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how do the consumers continue to get that expansion? It has to be by the ones who are continuing to expand and evolve themselves as well. And that's why, even on the onset, before coming into the discussion for today, is I wanted to highly emphasize your empire, because your empire is one that is beyond the evolutionary edge, not leveling up in a container of traditional frameworks. And the reason why that's so important to bring out is for the simple fact that there's a lot of innovation that's been taking place. But one of the things, as you've heard me talk about in several of our conversations and trainings, is that innovative strategy or format is really containerized still. And long term, it's not going to be as beneficial to the whole of the marketplace, which then means that disruptions have to come in to sort of bring forth newer perspectives, dismantle some of the old structures so that they fall away, so that the consumer can identify and relate to this evolution. So you want to align with people and brands and businesses who are on that evolutionary edge, and they're continuing to evolve and expand, because if they're allowing themselves to do it, then that means the benefit of the consumer, the marketplace as a whole, is going to win. So going back to even your empire, and of course what I know about this is that the way that you've been preparing and the expansion that's taking place, is taking people to a completely different stratosphere in terms of their leveling up advantage. For them to be as effective as they can be, especially in the communication space. And that's important right now. That's why we're talking about this, is because if you are not a chief authority and dominator by way of communication, your voice will get drowned out. Your brand, as good as it could be, will never truly see its true potential if you aren't on this evolutionary edge that Rob was just mentioning.
Well, and I think, part of this too is the communication piece is a big piece of getting out of that container, as you're
right. You're right.
When we look at trends of the most successful businesses, the ones that we all, if you think about Amazon or Tesla or some of the big players now, how many of them stayed in the container? And how did they get to be as big as they are today by staying in the container? Well, no, they didn't. They had some people that were willing to take some risks.
They disrupt the containers.
Exactly. And they stepped outside and they took some risk, and they got the rewards for taking the risk. And I think we've got a society that is quite risk averse.
Oh, that's a
it-
good point.
they'll look at, we hear the term best practices a lot, right? Well, it's easy to,
Yeah.
just look at the best practices, and we'll just follow those, and we'll reduce our risk and effectively stay in the container by doing so. So we have to shift the mindset as well in thinking, okay, well, what's coming next? Let's observe and let's
Mm,
have some intuition about what is changing, what will happen as a
yeah,
result of what is evolving, and how can we get ahead of the curve and
that's
innovate,
right.
be in that space so that we can be the, the leading authority rather than
Absolutely.
still be stuck back in that container.
You're so right. You're so right. And I like what you just said about you really being that leading authority, because that's what it's going to take. And some of the projects that I've been working on with other colleagues and also those within our mastermind space is really about leading the new way and being the new lighthouses. If you can't be a luminous, and not just a luminous in terms of big and bright, look at me, but have the perspective that is not just leading the way, but leading the new way, taking things in a new direction and allowing leaders to take thought beyond where it has been. And that's what happens in the demonstration of the communication factor. That's why the whole branding concept, branding through communications, is everything is communications, because every way that you show up is doing what? Is articulating something, right?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's communicating. So it's not just so much of what we are speaking in terms of vocally wise, it's how we show up in copy. Just everything. Everything becomes communications. And so that's why that awareness has to be embodied, that you are always branding. There's actually not a time that you're not branding. There's actually not a time that you're really not marketing, because every time you open up your mouth, you are marketing in some new format. When you show up on social media, you may not realize this, but you're marketing, because even if you're showing up in just the personal dynamics, someone's paying attention to that, and they're making decisions whether they're going to buy into your brand and do business with you at some point, just based on how you are what? Demonstrating through communication. You agree, Rob?
Absolutely. And this is why CEOs need to be visible, right?
Oh, I agree. Yes. Mm-hmm.
When you think about, who are the visible CEOs today? Well, you think about a Jeff
Mm.
Bezos or maybe a Richard Branson, or, there are ones who are clearly out there and are seen in multiple ways in the media. But how
Yeah.
many millions of companies have CEOs that are invisible? And they have opportunity to step into that visible space right now, like,
Yeah.
because there's very little competition, right? There's Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos and a handful of others,
Yeah.
but really not many CEOs are stepping up into that space to be visible and to communicate. And so,
You're so right. Yeah. They're
this,
being ghosts, right?
absolutely, there's
Ghost,
such a
ghost
tremendous
CEOs.
opportunity.
Mm-hmm. That's important. It reminds me of a conversation that you and I had on one of the podcast features, where I believe you talked about Walt Disney and how he used to come out and sort of make his presence known about what was going on behind the scenes, the development, and not hiding behind the brand, right? So he was
Yeah.
communicating. He was demonstrating that he could be personable, and that's what people could make a connection to, right?
Absolutely. And he was the brand early on, right?
That's right.
And then Disney came back to that in the 90s when Michael Eisner was at the helm. They came back to that. And so Michael Eisner was quite visible on television, in the weekly Disney specials. And then they kind of backed away from it again. So it's curious to me. I'm sort of interested to wonder and to know, why do companies sort of go back and forth from this? Because I think there is an element of trust and relationship that happens when those
Mm-hmm.
CEOs are visible and can show their personal connection to the brand.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree with that. One of the reasons why maybe the cycle happens is because sometimes they may be thinking that they're overkilling it in a sense by showing up too much. I don't know that to be true, but I would say even with that is that there's always, they could shift if I had to offer any advice to that, they could do shifting, because all the time it doesn't necessarily have to be the CEO to be the one that's continuing to show up. It could also be a secondary or a promotional ambassador too, that comes forth during those times when the CEO maybe doesn't want to be as vocal, but allowing someone else to come in just to fill the space, so to speak, at that time, but then coming back to the brand, the ultimate brand, or the CEO, being able to be personal with the audience. So
yeah, I think there's something about access. And to have access to the people who are actually running these, especially the larger organizations.
yeah, the larger ones, right?
Because they seem like they're inaccessible. You know, we feel like we don't know what they're doing. They're up there in their offices someplace, and we just have no way of understanding how they're involved in these companies. So to provide that insight, I think, is big for the end consumer of whatever product or service those companies are providing.
No, I agree. I definitely agree. I tell you, yes, we could go all in on these concepts, and
I know.
and yeah, it pulls so many out. Wow, just great stuff. I'm loving everything about this conversation for sure. So let's sort of move forward, unless you have anything else you want to add to that. If not, we can move forward to starting to talk about the basics of becoming a media communications-preneur. So do you have anything else you want to add to the branding through communications before we go there?
No, we've done well. Let's jump into the next thing. I think we've done well, and we're probably going to have more conversations on that, I'm sure. So
yeah, I'm feeling that too. Like the part 2, 3, and 4s, right? You know, can already feel that syncing up. But yeah, we definitely have covered quite a bit just in a little bit of time. So something I want to talk about, and you are becoming more familiar with this because, you know, you're the king, as I say, and the chief of this digital space as it relates to media communications. But because you've been leveling up more, you're starting to understand more. The new era media approach is really about building these media style empires and having this mindset of being a media communications-preneur, sort of versus being kind of a media feature on a regular basis to gain exposure for your business, much like what we've been talking about, you know, so far. But when this whole preneurship that I was mentioning earlier, this brings in a more profitable vibe. And this is what really starts the attracting factor, if you will, for opportunities, because it causes the brand to have to level up in a way to, how can I say it, they level up in a more profound way, and being in this preneur energy, which most people think they are. They think, well, I am an entrepreneur. So I'm an entrepreneur, but I communicate, I speak, I do all these different things. But you've heard me talk about this, but yeah, vibrationally, they're on 2 different frequencies. It's completely different calibrated strand. And so when the preneurship is not really embodied in all of these different components, then it blocks the profitability of the business, or, you know, or the brand. So being able to align with the right opportunities by leveraging a brand as a media communications based business is certainly the way that it's going. And I know in some conversations that you and I have had, where you could see, even with your own progression and evolution, it's like, oh, well, certainly this is where things are not only going, wow, this is where it should have been all along. Yeah. So basically, this really does start, and I'm sure you could agree with this, about the renewing of the mindset and the perspective shifts and perception shifts that you were talking about. And for me, when I teach this, it really is about being more intentional about one's agenda in the digital space. Because one of the biggest reasons why media processes, they don't work for most small brands or even small businesses, is because they are only seeing the media as a component of their business, and they're not seeing the media as the business. And that is the significant shift that has to be made in terms of a mindset and a way of being. Is you have to start seeing the media as the business. That's why in this new digital era, it's not optional. It is digital first, or what you've coined, digital first business. This you don't have an option. It has to be first. With that means that the media, you have to see your business as a media. I talk a lot about this in a lot of my media chess teachings, and also you've probably seen it in my publication, the Multimedia Chess Factor Made Easy, where I share about that concept. But when it comes to the communications aspect, several leverage their gifts of communications in their business, and they do this to use it as a primary vehicle to drive the results. But as I mentioned before, that's still I'm a communicator, I'm a marketer type of vibration, versus having this communications-preneur vibration. So this is the awareness, Rob, that these different frequencies, they really make a huge difference. And it's the very reason why speakers or communicators, they either fail or they just don't succeed in the business of speaking and writing or whatever it is, because they are just seeing these different elements of, okay, I'm a speaker, I'm a communicator within a business. And it's like, no, it all is the business, and this all is media focused. You can't dominate in the media space for impact nor for income if there is not this new embodiment. And you were talking earlier about some of the older models. I'm just going to reference this because even though some of the stuff seems new to most people, in terms of even what they see, some of the former disruptors. And so a lot of what they've done is old models as well too. The way that we level up and what we do, we can't necessarily do what Elon Musk did and Warren Buffett, because as they were leveling up, it was during a certain era where the way they were leveling up was most effective for that time. But we're in a different time, in a different era. And a lot of the older models or traditional models or those paradigms, they still might work to some extent for more of the legendary big name brands, because they're already well established.
Yeah.
However, the emerging and current brands really have to be more intentional and aligned with their endeavors in terms of this media communications, preneurship. And I will get into sharing just a little bit of the basics around that, but I wanted to sort of set more of a foundational premise to build upon what we've already been talking about. But before I jump into that, do you want to add to anything or interject anything in terms of what's been said so far?
Well, I think you described that really well. And I think, for me, if you're an author or a speaker, show me, right? Because maybe you have that skill set, but we're in a time where people have to be able to see that, this is what you do, and I have to understand that there might be a fit. Exactly, a demonstration. And then I think there's an element of control that people have to recognize too. So, you talked about how you and I come from traditional broadcast backgrounds and marketing communications. And so we've seen how things used to be done and really, frankly, are still done today fairly often.
Yeah, right.
Where, that control isn't really being taken, it's being handed off. So if I have something to promote, I go down to my PR department and let them take care of it. And they contact the media, send out a press release, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
we're in an era now where we don't have to do that, right? We don't need the media to promote what we're doing. We can actually
Mhm.
do it ourselves, and
That's
we can
right.
probably do it much more powerfully, frankly,
Oh, I agree.
than what the
Yeah.
traditional media can do for us. Where the
Mhm.
traditional media will be kind of a flash in the pan, and it might be good, right? There is a place for that.
Yeah.
But there is something much more sustainable available to us when we decide to take control and build ourselves up
Mm.
in these digital ways. So I think,
I love that. Yes, take control. That's that authority. That's that ownership, and that really is the true nature of the embodiment, if you will, in terms of the communicationspreneur, the media communicationspreneurship. Because going back to the companies, it's like you said, it's easy to pass off. And even in the entrepreneurial space, sometimes people, I don't like marketing. I can't stand this. That's not my gift. It's not my element. I want to just give this to somebody else to do. And though passing and delegating certain aspects are good, and I do recommend that, but
hmm,
I don't recommend a brand per se completely stepping away from being able to do those demonstrations that we've been talking about. Don't just pass your marketing off for someone else to now go and blow your brand up. We're not in that time anymore. We, you have to show up in a way, and even if it isn't, I think you made some distinctions at one point in a podcast where you talked about frequency versus consistency. You made some great distinctions there. Can you actually talk about that so we actually can play with that a little bit in terms of what we're talking about today?
yeah, I think the point of that conversation was really frequency and consistency are not the same thing. So
Yes.
as I mentioned earlier, talking about Get Vocal on Video with
Mhm.
Joseph L. Jones Jr., the consistency piece is we're showing up in the same ways. We're having the same sort of styles of conversation.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're showing
Mhm.
up maybe on a regular basis. Maybe it's, in the case of that series, we recorded it weekly and we posted it once we recorded it, so it was showing up once a week. Uh,
Yes.
and that's fine. That's consistency. If you produce
Mhm.
something that is consistent in appearance and branding and style and audience experience and timing too, then
Yeah.
whether it's
Right. Right.
daily or weekly or monthly or whatever it is, there's an expectation then for your audience to go back and look for more.
Mhm.
Whereas frequency, um, people get caught up in the idea that they have to be doing something all the time. So I've got to post
Yeah.
something on social media every day or twice a day or whatever it is.
And then some people are scared of that. That some people are the opposite, where they're thinking it's too much to do
Yeah.
because the expectation or so has been set, or a demonstration, I should say, has been demonstrated that this is the way you need to be doing it, and that's just not so. So there are a lot of people who aren't taking the action, or they want to pass off their marketing and not show up because they're afraid that then they're going to have to be the ones that are frequently showing up a certain way. But going back to what you said, it's not really about that. It's that you can be consistent, and you get to be in control to set that bar of consistency, and whether or not it's going to be once a week, bi-weekly, once a month, or every 90 days, however. Um, but when an audience can get a good grasp and understanding this is how you're showing up, then they have the expectation, and they know what to expect. But not being there and passing the marketing off to others to be the face of the brand, that's just not going to cut it, not in this digital era. No.
No. Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's how you show up, not how often you show up.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
and don't get me wrong, how often you show up can be a benefit eventually, right?
Oh, for sure.
When you look at the big
Definitely.
brands that are showing up really frequently, like a Gary Vaynerchuk, for example,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
on all
Right.
platforms all the time, seemingly. Well, he's been doing it a long time and he's got a team of people who are producing the content and getting it out there. So he's not doing it all himself. So
Right.
recognize what is within our capacity. And it's far better to do something that is within our capacity and do it well than to try to push out stuff on a more frequent basis that maybe isn't
Hmm.
as high quality as it could be.
I agree. That's right. That's really important. The quality and not so much the quantity or the frequency, right? It needs to be adding tremendous value, um, and not just something just for the sake of showing up. So, no, I like what you said. What I want to do now is just kind of talk a little bit about the basics of communications-preneurship, because this really does start with understanding that you're not just a communicator that's in business or an industry, just showing up just to communicate for your primary industry. This really goes back to what I've been talking about leveraging communications as the vehicle for sure in your business, or as the business and not just the component in your business model. This is where that preneurship, you have to think entrepreneurial, and most don't think that way. They think that they are. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this, Rob, is because when you only see, like I said, your business or different aspects as components, and you don't see the media and the digital space, like I said, as the whole, we think that within those different compartments that we're showing up in an entrepreneurial way, in a business framework format. But again, from the impact and income perspective, it doesn't pan out. And I'm going to be honest, and you know this too, a lot of businesses and solo brands are really struggling.
Yeah.
They are. And that's the truth of the matter. And there are those that are thriving for sure, but a great majority can't really show up in the demonstrations that they desire, is because they don't have the impact, or they can't make the impact that they would like to, based on the income factor not being there. So thinking that I'm a speaker and I'm getting booked and getting paid, for speaking gigs, or that's the goal, or getting these opportunities. But I teach people, but that's really not a solid model. If you're talking about getting consistency of repeat for high level opportunities, setting goals and writing them down, how many speaking gigs you want to get, writing endeavors, that's great. But again, it's not a solid plan. It's more of an intention, and we are talking about being more intentional, but the power of your intention is just important as the ones you set. So yes, it's great to set goals. It's great to make plans. However, if the thought process does not start flowing towards this embodiment of the preneurship as a whole, as I've been talking about, and this is meant to be disruptive. So what I'm sharing is not meant to be fully understood, because it is introducing sort of a new concept. So I am doing some mental disruption here. So I'll just let the listeners in on that. But if you're not flowing your energy towards building a solid and scalable and even sustainable profits model as a communicationpreneur, it's just not going to work in this digital era. This is where the multi-dimensional media communication-based business frameworks are at the huge advantage. And of course, you know about this because you've been going through the process. Mm-hmm. So within this type of model, people start to see every aspect of the business through these empirepreneurship lenses, okay? And you know this, where every key element does become an empire within itself, and it has that entrepreneurial vibe. So all of this is leading back to the communications factor. So let me expound upon this a little bit, just to provide a little bit more clarity. So let's say that a person's an author, let's say of several books. And then if they're an author, they need to see themselves as an entrepreneur, not just an author, because as I mentioned earlier, the vibrational frequencies are completely different. An author versus an entrepreneur, trust me, there's in that distinction vibrationally, it's a completely different game board. And this has to be embodied as a whole. You have to see every aspect as an empire within itself with a separate business model for success. So you do this with marketing, you do it with speaking, productions, products, offerings, you name it. You can't just see these as major organs to the business anatomy of your success, but you have to see it as a cohesive empire. So this means that each division should have a high-end business and profits model that potentially could yield from one platform what most try to get in a traditional 6 to 7 figure business model. We have to level up in these ways where these different empires within empires have the potential each to, to yield that. And so you're becoming more familiar, with this model, and you see how it makes sense for sure, right, Rob?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it can seem daunting at first. It seems like it's this huge thing that is made of unobtainium.
Yeah, unobtainium. That's a perfect word.
But I having sort of been going through the experience,
yeah.
it does take time, right? I think we have to be patient. It takes time, but
right.
You get into it and you can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And yes, it is multifaceted. And I don't think the intention is ever to sort of crush dreams of I'm going to be a speaker or I'm going to be an author or whatever it is. It's that, okay, I'm going to do that and I'm going to live that dream and I'm going to make it a sustainable, viable, long-term business somehow.
Yes.
And through these strategies.
Oh, well said. Yes, perfectly stated. Yeah, but that's because you actually are in the experience, right? So, you're in the experience. And so some of the things that you've been learning along with the others is that within these empires within empires, it does take on a completely different, not just perspective, but a way of beingness. So you are more in your entrepreneurial authority in these different levels, in these different dimensions. So just like a writer, I mentioned before, becoming a writerpreneur, a publisher, becoming a publisherpreneur, you have to learn how to make these distinctions. A speaker, being a speakingpreneur, communications or communicator, being a communicationspreneur. And so something I want to jump in, I want to say this really quick before moving forward, just on the note of the speaking preneurship and the communicationspreneurship, because that's mainly what we're talking about here in terms of the media communicationspreneurship for the digital era, is that a communicationspreneur doesn't just create, let's say, great signature talks or content in hopes that they will be discovered or positioned somehow on the right platforms for high level exposure. They go beyond this. They also create speaking products, they publish books, but they have the intentions with high volume selling systems to be able to support and design this sort of high-end framework. What I have learned over the years is that when you're just in that I'm a speaker mode or I'm a author mode, you don't really get the insights and wisdom that comes when there's a different level of the embodiment. And again, sharing this may seem foreign to several, and it is meant to be disruptive at this point, but it's where things are not only going, it's where it is now. And if there is not the syncing up with this and starting to get the understandings of this, then you're going to be not only just left behind, you're going to cease to exist, so to speak. And that's something that, Rob, you're being able to see as you're leveling up even more, where the business models that you had before, which under the traditional kind of solopreneur model, even though it was great structure, so to speak, but you could see long term how that was not going to be as sustainable as it could be.
Absolutely. And I think, as much as I enjoyed the work in my, what is now I considered an old model of business,
Yes.
I think that you're right. It wasn't sustainable long term. I probably would have kept doing it until I was ready to stop doing it at some point.
Yeah.
But what we're doing now and this trajectory that we're on now allows for the business to carry on, even if I decide not to, right?
That's right, because of the way that it's being built and the new concepts, and because you do a lot of production, obviously, and then in the digital space, it's kind of, we all are, in that bracket, but we're in production-preneurship energy, marketing, communications-preneurship energy, product-preneurship energy. So that means, again, getting different levels of insights of how to not only be more innovative, but also to have more simplified models and concepts that make more sense, help to leverage time effectively, and the return on investment for sure is a mega payoff versus the traditional format. And this is where things are not just going, but it's where they are now. And people who are not already synced up with this is the time. You have to get on board and start embodying and embracing these concepts. And a lot of what's been shared was designed to bring forth these new levels of awareness. But you will have to listen to this over and over just to let it sink in, for sure. So what we're really having to be about in this new era, this digital era, is you have to set up to broadcast your brand and your business as media communications networks, in a sense. And definitely Rob and I are going to talk about some next steps of how to help you sort of jump into that process. But before I even go there, Rob, do you want to say anything around the broadcasting aspect?
Well, I think the analogy for you and I, for sure, is, this is really about mass communication at its most fundamental level. And
yeah.
we, for us, it was traditional broadcast, radio and television to start with. But now we have different tools, and we have tools that are accessible to everyone, not just the people with the big advertising dollars or, the owners of the transmitters, so to speak, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
And so when we talk about broadcasting your brand, it's okay. Well, what is that brand? Let's nail it down. How do I want to show up to my audience, and how am I going to distribute that effectively to generate the business goals that I'm trying to achieve? And it really, it's broadcasting that. It's getting it out to the masses, but the right people at the same time. We're not just,
that's right.
It's not the shotgun approach. It's getting it out to the right people in the crowd. So
yeah, that's funny to me. Yeah, the shotgun approach. I hadn't heard that in a while. I was so used to, frequently you hear more of this spaghetti on the throwing spaghetti against the wall. I like that. Yeah, the shotgun approach. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, spray and pray, we call it sometimes.
Spray and pray. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on, right? It is.
There is. Yeah.
A lot of activity, but definitely no real results at the end. But definitely today, I believe in what we've been providing is creating these new awarenesses, but also stretching people, also making you scratch your head. What in the world is this? That's a good thing, because if some of what has been shared, a lot will resonate. But if some makes you question and you don't really understand, that's a great thing, because that means that there's disruption. There's an opportunity now to start exploring this. And again, understanding that you want to be in this space now, starting to level up and learn, than to be on the other end when this is the dominating force, which it already is, but it's going to become more illuminate. And when it's a mass perspective now, and you're not synced up with that prior, that's not going to be good. So, so that's why we want to, provide what we're providing to be able to get you excited about new things, but also to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable that you're going to have to do some shifting. But you'll see that actually you get into it, as Rob would say, it's not as difficult. It seems like it is, but once you're in the process and the flow, it's like, oh yeah, where has this been like forever? This should have been from the start. Just makes more sense, business and dollar wise, correct, Rob?
Yeah, well, and it can seem intimidating enough that you might think, oh, it's just easy to stick with what I'm doing. And a lot of businesses, I think, will continue to do that. And that's better for people like us, right?
Exactly, right. Yeah, well, for sure. Go right ahead.
That's it. And if it is
but we like
difficult,
to win together, right? Be kings and queens together, right? We love to not have to suck the air out of the room completely, but if left no choice, we certainly will do that.
Well, and if it's difficult, quite frankly, that's a learning opportunity. That's a huge,
it really is,
learning opportunity here. So
you got that right. And anytime you hit a plateau, just like in working out, when you get ready to go to the next level and start cross training, it's going to create, your workout's going to become a little bit more, I don't want to say strenuous, but when you step up, you got to do some different things, and it's not going to be as comfortable, but you think about the results, the payoff. And in this case, there's not going to be an option. So it's best to think up now than to be, whoa, I wish I would have, didn't realize,
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother conversation. So what we can do now, I'd like to shift to, Rob, if you don't mind me starting to talk more about the next ways that people can start to level up and start to embody, embrace some of these entry-level concepts and then start building effectively. Would that be okay for me to start sharing about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, great. So we want to actually gift our listeners with a bonus, 2 bonuses actually, of conversational training interviews that are going to be with René Johnson, the CEO of Power Zone Coaching and Leadership Y Communications. And she shares about the power of your digital leadership voice. So you're going to love to hear everything that she has to share about this. Also, the second conversational training is going to be on digital media maneuvering for your message. And this is going to be with Joseph L. Jones Jr., who we've talked about in this segment. And he is the CEO of I Am the Mound Builder Communications. And so these great communicators, and they have these communication empires. You're going to love hearing from them on these critical topics, because they're vital, they're important, and they're a must hear for everything that's emerging. And you'll be excited by both of their energies. They're great communicators, and I know, Rob, you can agree 1,000%.
Yeah, for sure. I think
that, so those are our bonuses that we want to gift the listeners with. We also have publications on Amazon, and one of mine, which Rob provided an outstanding forward to this work, it is the Brand Broadcasting Effect. And this is all about the next level business communications factor for brand positioning and multimedia marketing success. And it is an action planner. So you'll be able to understand more about this broadcasting factor and how it relates to the things that we've been talking about today. Also, there's a companion publication called The Business Broadcast Advantage, and this is by Rob. And for those who are new to this digital media space, we also have some publications for emerging communication-preneurs. So we've got a variety of things that can serve people at different levels. So for those who are just emerging as communicators, or even for those who maybe just want to level up their media agenda, so Rob has this publication, the On-Camera Confidence Handbook, and because he's the king of video communications and focusing more on the videopreneurship aspect, this here is for those who are wanting to get started. It's 11 easy steps to beat camera shyness and take your brand to the world, even just with your smartphones. And he calls it a light camera action planner. It's so great. I love it. I'm getting excited just even sharing this resource because I've had the privilege to read it and it is phenomenal. Also, I have a resource that's called Jumpstart Your Media Success with Speaking, and it's a media momentum preparation action planner, and this is for emerging speakers. So want to be able to provide these so that people at different levels can start to play and just get in and not wait, not delay in small ways as they're leveling up in big ways. I also want to mention an additional resource to consider of mine, and it's called Wow, You Do What? How Can I Work With You? And this is the wow factor evolution of marketing communications to have your ideal client saying, wait, what wow? So this is sort of a pitching and marketing planner. And so these resources can benefit you greatly as you are starting to level up as a media communications-preneur. We also have some upcoming endeavors that we would love for you to be a part of. So we have the Digital Media Disruptors podcast, because both Rob and I are disruptive energies in the best way to help level up top brands and also those who are emerging. So what we'll be doing is conducting several podcast series, sort of in a radio university style format. And this is with the goal of developing high-end digital media disruptors. So if you're interested in becoming a disruptor, then we're going to invite you to follow us at www.digitalmediadisruptors.tumblr.com so you can learn more about the podcast. Also, we have the Digital Communications Nation, which is our high-end empire building hub where we offer virtual trainings, masterminds, VIP workshops, and consulting and more. And this is really for those who are ready to create their own digital communications nations to start dominating in the media marketplace. And you can learn more about that at www.digitalcommunicationsnations.tumblr.com. You'll also find the information and links in the description box below this feature, or you can visit www.digitalcommunicationsdomination.tumblr.com, and there you'll find the replay of this training and the links to all that's been mentioned, but we're also going to have some additional bonuses on that platform as well. So, wow, it's been a lot here. So Rob, before we share our primary website, is there anything additional that you would like to mention as an offer or expound upon any of your publications?
Well, I think you covered a couple of good publications there. Just in terms of the theme and wrapping things up, you know, I think we've talked about a lot, and it may seem intimidating, as we've mentioned, but I just like to sort of provide some words of encouragement for people because, as we mentioned, I'm sort of going through this experience and this transition now, and it isn't as challenging as you might think it is at the outset. And certainly the rewards are evident and will pay off as they do with any good investment. So I think it's really considering. This is a time of change and uncertainty. And the options we have are to kind of go back into the container, as you call it, and sort of make it feel like it's our safe space, or we can embrace this change and we can evolve and we can prepare ourselves to move forward. And that's what I really would encourage people to do, because it will pay off.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to have you to come back and conclude us. But share your websites, and then I'm going to share mine as well.
Yeah, so people can find me at robertdeptford.com and getoncamera.com as well, that really is for the beginners also, where you can get a free mini course, just some things around how to get started with your smartphone and get recording some video that you might like to publish someplace.
Yeah, great site. He also has a mini course on there as well. I'll add that in. And you can learn more about me at www.AliNICOLEWOW.com and also www.wowshedoesitall.com. Because Rob, this has been like phenomenal. It's been a great conversation with you, and I always have great conversations. But I'm really glad we got to share on this topic, and I really like what you shared as the, empowerment. But would you like to share anything else before you close us out as a call to implementation to conclude this training?
Well, as we started off the top, we mentioned that this is really about a perspective shift and seeing things in new ways. And we talked through the conversation a little bit about these different facets of our businesses traditionally being in their own compartments. But when you think about it, they all have an impact on each other if we make changes to them. And so they are fluid, really, and they do work together. So if we start thinking about the business more holistically and thinking about how making these strategic changes can help us level up across the business, I think that's what's really going to help pay off as we move into this new era. Well, we're in the new era now, right?
Yes.
But for those who really are looking to have a strategy that enables them to thrive in this environment. We're going to wrap up this conversation, but I know, AliNICOLE, we are not done. It seems anytime you and I get together, we have a lot to talk about. So in the meantime, you can find us on various social media platforms, LinkedIn in particular, or YouTube and more. And we're going to be back. More to come. We'll talk to you soon.